What's up? It's Canucks this week. Bo Horvat's on a tear, but he's still without a contract. That's right. It's Dan Riccio and Randip Janda. What's happening with Bo Horvat? Randip, he's off to an incredible start. 8 goals in 10 games. That's a 65 goal pace for the season, but he's without a contract. What do you make of Bo Horvat's hot start to the season? Let's start there.
Yeah, you're not underestimating the start. 8 goals. He's tied for third in league goal scoring. So, when you're a couple of goals away from Connor McDavid, you've had a great start to the season. And a lot of that on the power play, but that's what's been helping the Vancouver Canucks power play hum along for the last few games. And when I look at Bo Horvat, I look at a player that's extremely motivated. And remember, a couple of games ago, about a week ago, Patrick Allvin issued a challenge saying, all right, I need my veterans to be better on this team. And for a couple of games, the Vancouver Canucks picked up a few wins. They beat Pittsburgh. They beat the Seattle Kraken. But who's been driving not only the offensive play, but also the defensive play? It's been Bo Horvat. So when you look at the disastrous start for the Vancouver Canucks, 2-6-2, one of the few positives has been Bo Horvat doing his job offensively, but also in the faceoff dot, 55% in the circle. So he's been a positive story for this team and answering the management's call. Problem is, he's almost the only one, or one of 2 or 3 players that's doing that.
This has kind of been one of my one of the drawbacks of Bo Horvat. I'll say that because look, he's been a great goal scorer for the Vancouver Canucks. He had 31 last year. If he doesn't get hurt at the end of the year, maybe he even gets close to 40 with the way that he was going before his season came to an abrupt halt with that foot injury after he blocked a shot. I get all that, and I see that he can be a 40 goal scorer in this league. It's just a lot of it has to come on the power play. Like there's not enough 5-on-5 scoring, and it's one of the issues the Canucks have had this year. They still can't score at 5-on-5. And yes, Bo Horvat, 8 goals already this season. His last 4 of those goals have all come on the power play. Now, is that a critique? I guess you can put it that way, but a lot of his goals do come with the extra man.
Of course, and good players score on the power play. Like we can't forget the fact that you're going to get those opportunities. JT Miller did, Elias Pettersson did. Remember last year we were talking about his point totals. How many of those came on the power play? And beyond that, let's not act like he doesn't play defense. He does play defense. He's tasked with probably the biggest matchup in any game. So I understand, of course, 5-on-5 scoring is what you want to see from Bo Horvat, but we can't discount those power play points.
See, this is the thing, though. It has to factor into what you are paying that player, right? And now that's where we get to the conversation about the next contract for Bo Horvat, because it's not exactly an easy one to have. As Jim Rutherford put it in an article he did with The Athletic this week, there's a difference of opinion on where that current valuation is. And I'm sure, if you think about JT Miller's contract that was signed this summer, $8 million per season, which kicks in next summer, that's probably at least where Bo Horvat thinks he should be, or at least in the range of that. $7.5 million, I think, is the floor, especially if he's looking into another 30 goal plus season. And if you factor in how the Canucks have not had success with this core, if you factor in they don't look good right now, the other cap commitments that they currently have, it just becomes very difficult to see how this marriage continues for me.
Well, especially since the rhetoric coming from Bo Horvat's camp is that he's a 1C. That 1C prices are not cheap across the NHL. And you hit on the JT Miller price. The JT Miller price, $8 million, 7 years. You got $56 million issued to that player over the next little bit, the extension that he got. That's a pretty huge sum of money, especially since, and I'm not willing to ask this question, is JT Miller a center, or is he best at the center position? If he's not, you essentially paid $8 million for a winger, which is okay. 99-point guy last year. But if
he's a 2-positional player, Randy.
He is, but which position's better is my point.
Yeah.
I think we all see that winger is better. If you're Bo Horvat's camp and you're looking at that and saying, all right, if he's the wing and he's making that much money, he's playing on this line, how much does my guy deserve? And that's really what it comes down to. Now, how many contracts can you afford? That is something that Patrick Allvin and Jim Rutherford are going to have to figure out, because there's a lot of extra baggage. Now, the question I have with all of these contracts, but especially the Bo Horvat one, because it's being negotiated now. It's going to come off the books at the end of the season if they get nothing done. How much can you commit to a team that doesn't win? That's the biggest question I have.
Yeah.
I like Bo Horvat as a player, but if you continue to lose and if you don't make the playoffs, which November 1st is kind of the start point where ish gets real, so to speak. When you start looking at the playoffs, you start looking at the percentages. If you're a losing team, how much can you bring back the old crew and say, all right, let's do it again? I like Bo Horvat as a player, but that's a question I think all of Vancouver, all of Canucks fans and the organization have to look in the mirror and say, if this ain't working, how much money can you commit to those same guys?
Randy, they need to go 7-2-1 over their next 10 to be just above 500 at the 20-game mark of the season.
Yeah, you didn't mention that they'd have to kill a penalty in those games too, which hasn't been coming very often.
Well, and you know what? Who's been a big part of the penalty kill as well? Not just JT Miller, but also Bo Horvat. They were burned on the first goal that New Jersey scored Tuesday night against the Canucks, and it's been a story, as old as time. It seems like now with the Canucks and their penalty kill just being at the absolute basement of the league, and it continues to be there this season. It is really difficult because ultimately, the biggest problem I see right now with the Canucks isn't necessarily an individual talent one. It's more about the overall mix that the team has, and it just doesn't fit. It does not work. You're fitting square pegs into round holes. You get a puzzle at your favorite puzzle store, and there's 100 pieces in it, and you get to the last two, and you're like, hey, these don't match up. I got 98 here instead of 100. There's missing pieces of the puzzle on this Canucks roster, and I don't know how you go about changing that without moving out one of your big pieces. And Bo Horvat, because of his contract situation, has become that for the Canucks. I know it's very difficult. He's the captain of this team. He's been an incredible player for the Vancouver Canucks through the years of his career, but there is still something that needs changing with this roster. And Bo Horvat, I can't get away from the fact that he is the biggest piece that Patrick Allvin and company have to potentially change the mix of this roster.
Listen, you're right, but the question is, are you a better team for it? For what you're going to get on the market, are you a better team for letting this guy go and not even completing this contract? And the question,
how can they be worse?
Well, when we're talking about the center position, are there other players that you can move off this roster? Because 2C, last time I checked, is a pretty important role on a team, and especially a team. We're not talking about a team that is but we're not talking about a team that's saying we're going to strip it down to the studs. They want to be competitive year after year. How can you do that without one of the best faceoff guys, a guy that's going to give you 30 goals? And I get bold moves are needed by this team. To me, Bo Horvat, you know how I love my Godfather analogies. He's getting treated like Fredo in the city when he's actually a Michael. He's supposed to be a stoic figure, a captain that's going to lead you. Man's getting treated like Fredo up in the city and this organization. And I don't get it, because last time I checked, their mandate is to try to be in the playoffs. They've said they're not going to rebuild this thing. How do you get any better without Bo Horvat as your 2C?
Well, I don't necessarily disagree with you that Miller's best position is off of the wing. At the same time, he did score 99 points last year, with the majority of those minutes coming at center. So it's not like he can't play the position. It's not like he can't have success playing that position. He's a really good hockey player, whether he's at center or at the wing, although we haven't seen enough of that this year from the $56 million man. I will admit that as well. So, okay. Now, final thought on this. It's Bo Horvat. He's the captain of this team, needs a big new contract. We know the situation. I think where they are right now, given the start to the season, it's impossible to make any sort of commitment in the near term because there's just so much up in the air. And I think you have to get to the deadline to see what potential deals are out there if this season continues to go off the rails. Now, one thing, as you point out, Randy, no matter what happens here, I don't think the Canucks are just going for the future type of deal if they go down this road of moving their captain. Like, I don't think they just want a pick and a prospect or 2 picks and a prospect or something like that. They want something that is more roster ready. And we can see that in some of the moves Patrick Allvin has already made with Jack Studnicka and Ethan Bear in the last week. They want players in their young 20s. They don't want an 18-year-old or a player that is yet to be drafted, as much as one that is closer to being to the NHL.
Yeah, if you're thinking about that Kevin Fiala deal that ended up getting Minnesota pick and Brock Faber, like the Canucks are not. Once they signed that JT Miller deal and they added that extension, it's essentially over the next few years with that Thatcher Demko contract that you're trying to make a move to be a contender, playoff team at first. Forget contender, one step before the other. But this is, you're looking at players. If this deal does happen, 20-something players, right? You're starting to see more players, whether it's Ethan Bear, as you mentioned, Stadnicka, where they're in that early 20s range, mid-20s range. So if you get to the trade deadline and still it seems like they're far apart, you have to have that conversation. I am a fan of Bo Horvat. I think the Canucks would be foolish to, if there's a legit chance to get a deal done, that you move off of them. But if we're talking about this in late January, if we're talking about this in February, yeah, it's time to essentially put the for sale sign on. Who knows where the team will be at that point? But if it continues this way, I think you have to have that discussion, because one thing is for sure, Bo Horvat is going to have suitors across the league, whether it's a trade deadline, but definitely in the UFA status when he's an unrestricted free agent. And if he feels as though he wants to test the market, he feels as though he wants to see what the market can command, we're talking about $8+ million. If he continues to score it this way, you're looking at a long-term deal with at least $8 million. And if that's what the player has in mind, we don't know this, but that's every player's right wants to hit UFA status. You have to consider the trade option. Even me, as a person that thinks this team needs Bo Horvat on it in the next few years, at the very least, to solidify that 2C position, February, you got to start thinking about it.
That's a big number. And the way he's playing right now, it's hard to argue that he's not worth at least $8 million per season on the open market. And if you look at the pending free agents for next summer, it's basically him and Dylan Larkin as the top two at the center position. And I think we are expecting Dylan Larkin to remain a Red Wing. It could make Bo Horvat the top available free agent center on the market. We know those players just absolutely get paid. Is Bo Horvat a part of the solution with the Vancouver Canucks, or is he a piece that can help Patrick Allvin retool? Let us know in the comments, and we'll see you next week on Canucks This Week.